VPNs are a remote work staple, but they're hardly the most secure way to access corporate data. We're going to be talking about some alternatives to VPNs and what IT should consider when securing remote and hybrid work. Stick around. Hey everyone, welcome back to Today in Tech. I'm Juliette Beauchamp and I'm here with Michael Hill, the UK editor for CSO Online. Michael, thank you so much for being here with us today.
No problem. Thanks for having me here with you.
So I just wanted to start with sort of a brief overview. Why are VPNs in place in the first place? And what should they be used for? What should they not be used for? And how does that sort of relate to what they are currently being used for? That's perhaps not the most appropriate way to use them. That's a lot of uses. Uses.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, so VPNs were put in place quite a few years ago, really, and they've been the staple of securing remote access for organizations. The issue is they've always been built from the perspective of organizations having a very small percentage of their workforce working remotely at any one time. So, I mean, we're talking here organizations having the vast majority of their workforce in an office, in that perimeter environment, with maybe a few people working from home, or if they're traveling for business and they need to access the company network, they can do so using a VPN. And for several years, for that purpose, they've worked very well. Things did change, obviously, in 2020 with the pandemic and the overnight shift to mass remote working, really. And the issue is VPNs, if they're relied upon solely in that mass remote working norm that we find ourselves in, it creates quite a security headache for a number of reasons. Basically coming down to the fact that they just weren't designed, they weren't built for mass remote working. They were built to allow a small amount of the workforce to remotely access an organization. So that's kind of led us to the point we're at now, where obviously the remote and hybrid working norm era is kind of here to stay. And it's leaving organizations in this position where they're having to kind of look at other means to secure remote network access, to not necessarily to replace VPNs altogether, because they do still have a purpose, but to very much supplement them with other means of security and network access controls that takes into consideration more secure means to bolster that security.
Sure. So it seems like for this day and age, this new working world, VPNs are just not a practical standalone solution. Like you said, perhaps they could be coupled with something else. So before we go into some of these alternatives, I am curious what some of the challenges are associated with maintaining traditional VPNs in this, largely remote or hybrid work world that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, that's a great question, because there are a few really, and they can vary across organizations, and some are very much technically focused, and others are more in the usability piece, but they all kind of combine to kind of throw up a number of challenges really. The first one is the simple fact that a VPN extends the organization's network. That's the idea of it. However, obviously the issue is a lot of people's home network aren't as secure as within the organization, the office. So that was less of an issue back when you had a very small percentage of people working from home, to when all of a sudden you've got the vast majority of your organization working at home or working remotely. That's a real issue. It raises the risks a lot more of being targeted just by the fact that home networks are less secure. So that's one of the issues. Another point is, for a VPN to be secure on a device, the device has to be patched and kept up to date with its patching. So that becomes quite a challenge for organizations who have not only a vast number of employees working at home, they now need to keep these patches updated. The most secure VPN in the world won't necessarily mean for much on a laptop that's not, or a device that's not patched and up to date.
That's a great point.
So there's a real issue there with keeping devices patched and up to date as well. Particularly when everyone's working remotely, how do you go about doing that? It throws up new challenges. There's also the usability piece as well, because they're, like I mentioned, VPNs aren't designed for mass use at any one time. And there are usability challenges with that. And when you've got a lot of people trying to access them and use them, they can be quite slow, they can be quite cumbersome. So that creates challenges where you might get employees trying to work around them to access certain things that they want to do for their work. And that creates risk, because if people are working around them, they're doing risky things, they're trying to run programs and applications which are maybe a bit questionable, haven't been vetted by the organization's IT team. So it can lead to risk as well. So, and not only that, but also you want your workforce to be productive. You don't want them to be disgruntled by not being able to get on with their work, because the VPN's being kind of overloaded, if you like, by a massive amount of people trying to access it, and people can't get on with their work, and that creates obviously not the best environment as well. So, I mean, yeah, the challenges are numerous really, and they all lead into different risks and threats, purely because VPNs aren't designed for the mass remote working norm.
Yeah, absolutely. And to jump into sort of, our big question here, which is to talk about some possible alternatives. And there's a few, and I will link, Michael has a great article from CSO Online, on CSO Online, that I will link in the description. So you can check out definitely a more robust description and explanation of each alternative, because we're just going to sort of run through some higher level suggestions here. But I would think that when you're deploying any possible alternative, and I want to hear about at least a few, usability is really important, not just for whoever is deploying it, whether you're, a small to medium business and perhaps you don't have a dedicated security person and you're just, you're an IT admin at this company. You want it to be usable not only for you, but you also want to, like you said, you don't want a disgruntled workforce on your hands who can do the tasks necessary to complete their job. So I would imagine that should be front of mind. So some of these alternatives, I know in your article you mentioned quite a few. So what are some alternatives that are best suited for a given circumstance? I would think that it would be beneficial for an IT admin or whoever you are on your IT team to assess what you already have in place, what sort of security protocols, frameworks, what have you, and maybe build upon one of those frameworks to at least pair with the VPN for a more secure option?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we find ourselves in the position now where organizations are having to adjust their security strategies across a number of different issues. But obviously, remote network access is such a big theme at the moment. So yeah. And you're right, there are a number of things they can do, and it will depend on the organization what's quite right for them. I think, to start at the top, the real kind of buzz phrase, if you like, is the zero trust approach. Now, I mean, that's a phrase I'm not personally too keen on. I think it's, again, that's kind of been floating around the industry for a number of years as well. But essentially what that is an approach to security whereby you don't trust any user or device by default. So
sure. You
take the approach that everything could possibly be vulnerable, which is probably a good approach to take. And what, so in some ways, what that tries to do is, do the same things that a VPN tries to do, but it can add several other layers of security. So that can be privileged access, it can be authentication via identity, employment verification, credential storage. So what it means is that if you're building all of these things into remote access based around identity, and it adds these layers, which means that if a device were to become infected, attackers would only have access to that one device. It makes it a lot more difficult for them to then spread from device to device, which is easier to do via VPN, because that's literally just one credential or password. And we know how easily passwords are, leaked and found on the dark web and things. So it adds more layers to it. And then within that, I mean, zero trust is more of a concept rather than any kind of defined approach. But within that, it allows you to introduce things like identity access management and privileged access management. So solutions that incorporate comprehensive verification process to confirm valid logins compared to traditional VPNs, which again only use a password. SASE as well, which is Secure Access Service Edge, which is very much kind of looking at the cloud. So turning to the cloud now and using cloud technology to combine the network and security functions together. And what that allows companies to do is to unify the network at one singular point from one screen, if you like. So that's another approach that a lot of organizations are looking to harness that cloud technology. Another thing that organizations kind of looking at and that I hear talked about quite a lot is a software-defined perimeter. So that's a network boundary based on software instead of hardware. And also you can build that out to a software-defined wide area network. So software and centralized control function that can steer traffic across the wide area network in a smarter way by handling the traffic based on priority, security, and quality of service requirements as per the business's needs. So, I mean, these are all things that can kind of combine together and add many more layers of security that are far more sophisticated than just a simple password as per VPN. I mean, there's been research about, VPNs having vulnerabilities within them. I mean, they're just platforms after all, and being targeted for those reasons by attackers and things. So it's all about taking a more holistic, identity-driven approach, using emerging technologies like the cloud as well, to improve the layers of security and take the burden off of a traditional VPN system, to better protect the organization.
Yeah, it seems like the crux of what you're saying, and really what's at the crux of all of these potential solutions, are that they are identity based and they aren't just a broad sweeping measure and saying it doesn't matter where you are in the organization. Sure, you can access the corporate network because you are using our VPN client. And I think that's whatever solution you as an IT admin or you as an IT team decide upon, it seems like identity-based is going to get you a much more secure option. And so then why are these alternatives better and more suited to a vastly remote workforce? I mean, as we say very often on this channel, besides the fact that remote work is still ongoing, it's also here to stay between remote and hybrid models. It seems unlikely for most businesses that have already had remote workers working from home that you're going to get 100% of the people back in the office 5 days a week.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. Identity-based approaches are, I think, the future of authentication, because within that strategy, what it allows you to do is introduce other factors of authentication. So we hear about multi-factor authentication, and there's a few different ways of doing that, but it's essentially, an extra layer of authenticating who you are. And it's far more holistic and it's less static than just a VPN system, which is just a one-off credential and you're kind of in. And once you're into the network as a whole.
Yeah.
And it's harder to introduce things like privileged access, so you can only access certain elements of the network via VPNs if you're just relying on them. So definitely identity is what more organizations are looking to do, an identity-focused strategy to securing remote network access. Like you say, I mean, it's kind of an interesting point now where some organizations are kind of very much looking at staying remote on the whole, and you've got other organizations looking to go back to the office and have a kind of a hybrid between the two. So, I mean, that again is going to open up new challenges, because you also now got to consider where you're going to have employees sometimes in, sometimes out. So you've got to work that out as well. But I think the biggest part of this, and what it comes down to is for any organization, is to first assess what their most important assets are for the organization. So what are they, what's most important to them to protect, and why? What users need to have access to what and why, and then go about aligning their approach with those. And that can be quite a challenge. And sometimes it's good for organisations to kind of reach out to external services for support in doing that. Consultancies and advisory companies and things like that help them kind of nail down what it is that they're actually their crown jewels. Because not every approach is going to work for every organisation, depending on the work they do, their size, how much they need people in the office compared to other companies. So there's a lot of kind of moving parts there. But I think it's if you start by getting that business case nailed down first in terms of what you actually want to achieve and what is critical to your organisation, that's the best place to start.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly no surprise that security is not a one-size-fits-all option, because it's going to depend on, your specific use cases, there's a large swath of things to consider before rolling out any alternative. So just to wrap up here, I guess I'm curious, if you are a small to medium-sized business, for example, and you deployed a VPN, let's say at the beginning of the pandemic in early 2020, because that was a really, a quick and easy option, certainly, to make sure that everyone in your company has access to your corporate network. I guess I'm curious how some of these solutions can work together with the VPN, or do some of these just completely eliminate the need for a VPN?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think just to what you touched on there in terms of the VPNs that are in place to begin with, I think there's a real mixture of, there were some organisations who were much further down the road with putting in place agile remote working
Sure.
At the start of the pandemic, compared to others which were kind of coming to it from a brand new position. So there was definitely, you've got a real mix of companies, having to do that for the first time and going out and getting VPNs from scratch. Other companies relying on the VPNs that they had in place that were used on a very small scale, and then relying on those solely. So you've got organisations, that now have to look at things and think, well, is this the right way to go? A lot of these things that I've mentioned there, so under the zero trust approach, and looking at things at a software-defined level and using identity and using the cloud, a lot of them work together. And I think it's sometimes a bit of misconception that these things are, going to be very expensive. It's not always the case. It's actually the biggest investment, I would say, is putting the time in to making sure that you deliver this as a concept. So, like I said, there is no product you can buy now that's going to secure your mass remote workforce. It doesn't exist, unfortunately. So a lot of it is how you approach doing that. And actually, I think the best way to kind of create cohesion between the different approaches you're putting in place is actually through transparency and communication with the workforce. So if you are looking to put in place, new approaches to securing the workforce, you have to communicate what you're doing and why. I think in the past, it's been very easy just for security to kind of be quite invisible within organizations, and a new product's bought and it's put in place, and the general users who aren't necessarily knowledgeable of security don't always understand why are these things in place, why do I have to go through these certain steps of authentication to get in to the system. So a big part of that comes down to communication, and that helps build a culture of awareness. Okay, so why what is zero trust approach? What does that mean? It doesn't sound a very nice thing. But
no, it doesn't.
No, exactly, and I think that's one of the problems as well. So it's communicating things in a way that actually for the average user is more approachable. All that means is just taking a different approach to securing things from a multi-layered, focused approach, really. So that I think that comes down to being transparent and making it known what you're putting in place, why it's in place, and actually why it's of benefit to the organization. How does it protect the organization? How does it protect individual users on a day-to-day basis in terms of the work they're doing and the threats that they can be exposed to through working at home? That's far more valuable, I think, to get the buy-in and the support and the understanding from the workforce, who are then obviously having to take on these different, implement these different approaches.
Yeah, of course.
Rather than just kind of pushing against them or trying to work around them and just finding them kind of as a frustration, thinking, why have we got to, why can't I access this thing without entering this information? Why do I have to go through these processes? It's about building that awareness and culture piece, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, it's certainly been said before, this is not breaking news, but your workforce is a really important piece of your defense against any sort of security events, whether it's, a cyber attack or a data breach, or just making sure that you're a more secure workforce. It's really important to make sure that your people are aware and they aren't abusing the systems that are in place. So I think that's a really great point, to make sure that these solutions and alternatives are effectively communicated to your workforce so they know that they are really an integral part of its success. Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate it. I think there was some really good information here about, and giving a pretty good overview about what people need to consider, what IT teams need to consider, and or security teams before rolling out any sort of alternative to a VPN. Because like I said in the beginning, VPNs, I think, can be to a certain extent, perhaps more marketed towards a consumer as a end-all be-all security solution, but that's just simply not the case, as we went over here. So I really appreciate it. I think there's some really valuable insights here. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
And thank you all so much for watching this episode of Today in Tech. If you want to learn more about any of these alternatives, and also about, Michael also has a really interesting article about demystifying some of these security buzzwords, like Zero Trust, for example. I will link those in the descriptions below. And I'll also link any applicable videos that we've done previously about securing remote work in the description. So be sure to check those out if you are interested in learning more. If you liked this video, please do give it a thumbs up, and you can subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so you're notified every single time we post a new video. If you have any questions or comments about VPN alternatives, maybe you've deployed one of these to success, or maybe you have thoughts about any of them, maybe you have another alternative, please do let us know in the comments below. I'd really like to hear from you. And if you have a question, I will do my very best to get back to you. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next time.